We also have Ali Ode, who is part of this year's BEARS Environmental Leadership Program. You already must know him. And he's the Executive Director of the Union of Palestinian Service Water Providers. Thank you, Ali. We're going to hear from Ali and his remarks and based on his experience. Thank you, Ali.
Thank you. Water and energy scarcity in the Middle East is a main concern for all of the governments there. In Palestine, particularly, this is a much sensitive issue due to Palestinian lack of control over their water resources. So our main role is to ensure maximum use of the available water resources. So before start speaking about our organizations, I want to speak a little bit about the water resources in Palestine and some of the figures and facts. In Palestine, we have 4 main water aquifers with a capacity around 700 million cubic meter. Also, we have Tabariya Lake. Also, we have some springs in some cities, and we have a desalination plant in Gaza. So the area has a good amount of water. But the issue is the access to the water resources. The Palestinians are allowed to reach now for 15% of the groundwater only. For the Tabariya Lake, we don't have an access, 0%. To the Jordan Valley is also 0%, just 15% of the groundwater only. In Gaza, we have a coastal aquifer. You know, I don't know if you understand the map very well. We have West Bank, Gaza, also Israel. This is as a fragmented area. In Gaza, we have a coastal aquifer. There is a huge pumping from Gaza because we have 2 million people there. Also, a huge number of groundwater wells around Gaza in the settlements. So the water level become down below the sea level and the saltwater intrusion goes there. So 98% of Gaza water is polluted by nitrate, and a huge number of blue babies there, and some of them died. Anyhow, there was some solutions before the war, but stopped. And also now the water desalinations, we have 3 there, 1 completely destroyed, 1 partially destroyed, and 1 is still working there. This is in the general situation about the water resources. Okay, for our organization, in West Bank, we have 250 water service providers, more than United States, more than Europe. This mainly because of the political issue. For example, I'm living in a village. This village has a groundwater well since before 1948, so we have the right to pump from this. We are selling a village close to our village. This village also selling water to another village. So the price is different, the administration is different, everything is different. So because of this, we have 250 water service providers. So to overcome the geographical fragmentation, on that account, a platform for cooperation in the Palestinian water sector was founded, which is called the Union of Palestinian Water Service Providers. What we are doing in this organization, we are implementing capacity building programs at different levels: technical, managerial, financial. Also, we are arranging yearly international conference. We are bringing experts for the most needed issues from the whole world. We are developing manuals for wastewater management, also for water supply. We have technicians working for non-revenue water. In Palestine, we have 50% non-revenue water, leakage, or commercial non-revenue water. So that means we only have access to 7% of the groundwater, because we have 15%, so half of this 50% is we lose it. Also, we are helping the service providers to develop a tariff management system. The tariff is totally different from north to the south. Okay, we also are working in development projects. Such of the projects I started before I came here is installing a prepaid water meters for factories, because they have a high consumption and they sometimes didn't commit by payment. This is kind of the things we are doing. Also, another projects we started before I came here is energy efficiency, water energy efficiency, because we have limited resources of energy and water. We are trying to maximize use of or to optimize use of the water utilities pumping. This is the main things that we are doing in our organization.
Pass him the microphone, please, Ali. So the question I had for you, Paulo, is the following. You made a very interesting remark, which is thinking of water as a resource versus water as a hazard. That lines up with what David mentioned, right? So droughts versus flooding. And I wanted to see if you can tell us about what excites you, or what do you think are the challenges that you are worried about or thinking about in managing the challenges brought about by climate change. So maybe tell us about what you're excited or worried, what should we be thinking of as we confront this future.
Okay, thank you, Marco. So I think we can look first at the water as a resource, and again water for agriculture. I think the main challenge is that when we look at some of these climate change studies, some parts of the world that are cultivated are expected to see more drought, so more water scarcity. And areas that where agriculture, these are also in temperate zone, agriculture is suitable now in rain-fed conditions, we require irrigation. Some areas that are irrigated, we require more water for irrigation. And sometimes they where the water is available, because if it's not available, there isn't much option. The problem is there is often a mismatch between when the water is available and when it's needed for irrigation. And so we did this type of studies. We saw that this mismatch is expected to increase, which means that there is going to be an increase in the need for storages. And we know that water storages are very controversial. So of all water infrastructure, I'm a hydraulic engineer, so I'm fascinated by them. So we know that they are very politically controversial, also environmentally, because of the erosion they cause downstream, and also because also it's a way to gain control on water resources. And so there are many issues that sometimes make it even less viable. And there are now an interesting thing is that we are revisiting older ideas of groundwater storage, which are presented sometimes as new things, but instead people have been talking about them since ever. So, and the idea of storing water below ground, which sometimes could be called nowadays some sort of a green infrastructure instead of gray infrastructure, in the sense that you don't need to build, you need to still some infrastructure, but much less impactive, but then you can store water during the wet season and use it during the dry season. So that's probably a new, not a new thing, but a new direction that we can take. Even here in California, there is interest for this type of approaches. The other thing is when we talk about irrigation, there is also the whole debate about what type of irrigation, and again and the impact that this irrigation can have downstream, because of the fact that if we replace flood irrigation with drip irrigation, there is a reduction in return flows, so whatever is not used by plants, and so this deprives of water downstream areas or the aquifer. So there are these issues. From the point of view, instead of water for flooding, as David was referring, that's a major issue, and we have seen, we see that continuously in the news, right? So this is also a challenge to study this phenomena, because we used to, in classical hydraulic engineering, we used to say a certain event has a certain return period, but the return period was calculated always under steady state conditions, and the climate system is not steady state. So there is a lot of research happening now to characterize both the drought and the floods and their return period, which can change in somebody's lifetime.
Thank you, Paolo, for that. That's pretty exciting to think about. Let me ask the next question to David. And here, being a colleague economist, we often think of the market as having certain advantages in terms of management aspects and efficiency, but we often overlook aspects of affordability when we allocate via market mechanisms. So I was wondering, I wanted to hear your thoughts on what programs or experiences domestically or internationally you have seen that give you hope that we can achieve success in terms of providing sufficient, sustainable, and affordable water to populations worldwide.
No, the issue of water allocation and pricing is the old issue. Now, one approach that we work a lot on is the approach that is called tiered pricing. Tiered pricing is an approach that you have a certain low price for a basic amount of water, which is a lifeline, and then beyond a certain level you have a higher price, and then at the third level you have the market price. So if you are rich, you pay a large amount, and if you are poor, you pay a lot amount, and a lot of cities have this type of solution. Now, actually in California we tried to introduce this type of thing, and there were a lot of legal systems that prevented it, but in many parts of the world tiered pricing is working. Now, one big issue is not so much is that water infrastructure in many places, the issue is not the price of water, the issue is that do you have a house? Do you have a pipeline to the house? What's the issue of sewage? So a lot of time, maybe about 20% of the people in the world basically get water, buying it, get water illegally. So to some extent, moving toward a system where you have a market and all the elements that are associated with formality is not relevant to a lot of poor people. They need to be linked to a system where they basically are part of the population that is legitimately recognized as part of the population. And that's the reason that a lot of times the allocation of water is an informal, by an informal mean, or people get a certain amount of minimal water for free. Now, generally speaking, you really don't have a lot of places that water is allocated by market per se. Like in California, we try now for years to introduce water trading, and that basically, and it's done very, very gradually. We have a system of water right that basically first come, first serves. The only area where you have, and this is mostly in agriculture, the only area that you have some sort of water market is in the urban sector, because surprisingly people pay in the urban sector much more for water than in the rural area, because the infrastructure in the urban sector is much more expensive. And in some cities you have, like what I said, the tiered pricing. In other cities you have utilities that basically charge people. But altogether, in principle, what markets work. In reality, you have very little use of market, and there are a lot of other arrangements that allocate resources, that adjust to different to variations. So that's the reason I say we don't have the same price of water all the time. It's different in different locations. And the one thing that Paolo said, one of the most interesting things that happened in water was that till 1970, the way that you solve California or almost every place in the world, water problem was to build a dam. Mm-hmm. So population was growing, there was relatively a lot of water, there were a lot of developers, so they built one dam after another. What happened in California, which I think is a really good lesson, is that 1970, for whatever reason, people say, gosh, we don't want to divert more water. And surprise, we don't have new sources of water. We basically get much more out of the water because slowly we introduce water trading, very slowly. We introduce modern irrigation strategies. We start using conjunctive use. So a lot of time what really is happening with water, that the easy solution is to build a new dam rather than to think about a mechanism that use water more efficiently. Mm-hmm. So the way from an economy, the way I look at water is not from, gosh, do we have a market, but is the water use efficient? What is the benefit cost ratio, taking into account the environmental benefit? And then we have different institutional arrangements that are appropriate to the situation.
Is for Ali. Obviously, we're very interested and we're aware of the short-term urgent issues. Maybe you want to tell us a little bit about that and maybe a call to action if people need to, I wonder how the international aid community can do anything, and longer term, what are the main risks and opportunities you see in the Palestinian water sector?
Okay, for the water access for the Palestinians depends on a lot of things, but I will talk about three things. The first is to increase the water supply. Since, as I told you, the Palestinians are not allowed to dig any groundwater well. The last two wells, since 1967, we are allowed to dig two wells. One was in 1998 and the other was in 2007. And in case you want to dig any well, it's considered illegal illegal well, and I don't want to speak about the cases what will happen in case you try to do such thing. So we need to increase the water quantity. The other issue is to improve the infrastructure. For the water supply network, it covers around 60% of the Palestinian areas. So another 40% are not covered. They are using trucks to take water. Also managing water losses, as I told you, we have 50%. For the main risks that we have is limitations and restrictions from Israeli side on different things. Even for transferring water from area to area. For example, in the northern of West Bank, we have a good quantity of water and the situation is much better than the south. But you are not allowed to make like a national water carrier. You can submit a permit and get a reply after a lot of years, maybe 10 years or 15 years or whatever. So this is one of the risks. The other risk is climate change. For example, if you go to the Dead Sea, you see areas, the water level started decreasing by meters, not centimeters like somewhere, by meters. You see dry areas. And the Dead Sea is something global, not for Palestinians. It helps in medications a lot of people all around the world. So this should be taken in consideration. The main supply water for the Dead Sea, it comes from the Jordan Valley. Now you don't find any drop of water in the Jordan Valley because the two things, King Abdullah Canal in Jordan and the national water carrier in Israel. Also, we have a problem for lack of funding. I don't want to speak about that, but it will take a lot of time. For the opportunities, We have Palestinian human resources experience very well in the water issues at all levels. Also, we are highly open for regional and international cooperations. At a short level, at a short يعني يعني for يعني short term for solutions we can work on different things. The first thing is we need more pressure on the Israeli government to continue selling Palestinians as at least the previous quantities before the war. A shortage in the quantities happened. Some such of cases, if you go to Bethlehem city, in some areas they didn't have water since 30 days, or some of them 40 days, some of them 50 days. At the same time, if you go to the settlement, which is some meters away, far from the city, the consumption of water by settlers is from 400 to 600 liters per day, since they have a swimming pool and luxurious life. But at the same time, Palestinians, they have in this city 30 to 50% in the normal case. This is documented in the World Bank reports. Also, we need a pressure to continue selling the water as before the war. We can also working as a short term in implementing a reservoir at the community levels or balancing tanks. We can also enhancing the rainwater harvesting and treatment of this water because it's easy the access. Using solutions for saving water consumptions like vacuum toilets or other things because it consumes a high quantity of water. At a long term, we can controlling over the key performance indicators such as non-revenue water, collection efficiency. We have a huge problem in the collection efficiency, tariff structure, operation and maintenance issues, industrial waste, and such things needs to be worked on the long term. Securing additional quantities as per the dead red agreement, and to be fair, agreement not like Oslo agreement. If you go to Article 40 in Oslo agreement and read the terms of the agreement between Palestinian and Israeli, it looks like that Palestinians are forced to sign to lose their rights in the water. Anyone can go to this Article 40 in Oslo agreement. I was so kid at that time, but I had a lot of meetings with the Palestinian negotiators. I asked them, how did you sign on this? This is, I don't know. Also, we can, as a long-term performing institutional and governance for the Palestinian water sector. As I told you, it is not governed very well. And now there is a project for the World Bank to make clustering or to make a national water company for, I hope they succeed by that. This is in general. We have specific things, but it looks that my colleagues are tired and cannot complete.
Your comment, Michael, about secular institutions not being set up to regulate transboundary issues. Also recognizing that you mentioned previously within the United States, the church and the Black church has played a part of environmental justice movements. And then also reflecting on something, a few examples of restoration projects that I've heard some of my colleagues reflect on, that a comparison of a Christian ministry running them and was really beloved by the community versus one from a more secular NGO that did not have a connection to the community, was unsuccessful. I'm curious, and if you're comfortable, Ali, I would love to hear from you, like what is the difference, what role could religious institutions play in helping regulate or mediate transboundary water issues, and then also what is it like approaching like transboundary water issues in a region that has like more like religious like connection to the state compared to other places?
You go first. I've spoken too much already.
But يعني just to make sure that I understand your question very well, I heard you that you mentioned something religious.
Yeah, so I'm curious, what role do or could religious institutions play in mediating or regulating
the religious institutions, it doesn't يعني kind of a it's not a stakeholder of the issue. They doesn't have any input in this issue. For the transboundary water issues, the control is from Israel. Okay, so as I told you, we cannot dig any water, and it's really shared aquifers. So this is the situation.
If you look at the issues, religion, especially in the Middle East, are a big problem. Most of the settlers, basically, they look at the Bible. Think about it. A lot of people, the basic point there that religion there is a big difference between American religion, between the black church that was the only galvanizing force for a lot of depressed minority during long period of time, versus two religions that they basically believe that they hold the truth, and they basically they are totally intolerant of other people. Generally, most of the agreement in the Middle East or any place were done between people that basically are modern and basically accept some science and modern agenda. I know the Orthodox in Israel, they have no compromise because God is with them. So to some extent, one of the big issues that you have is the effect of, it's not only religious, there is something religiosity. If people are very strong believers, it's very difficult to find a lot of arrangement because that will be the dominant factor in their life. I don't know what you think about it, Ali.
It's like the religious institution is like not a stakeholder. That's something that I guess we'll talk about it more on Friday, but in our conflict and stakeholder management group, talking about like when you're looking for a neutral facilitator that's trusted by many stakeholders, like drawing on a religious leader in the community to facilitate stakeholder meetings, maybe at the small scale. I don't know if that works at the larger scale.
But to that point, is anybody neutral?
Like
all of the biases in our life, so I'm not sure that we can look to honestly anybody as a neutral source or as a neutral facilitator in the issue.
I would also like maybe not necessarily in such a context, but rather I know, for example, where religious leaders have been part of programs to promote energy efficiency, for example, but there's no conflict involved. I think it gets more complicated with conflict, especially when there's different religions.
The religious institutions is not dealing with the water issues. The organizations who's tackling or dealing with issues is the authorities, non-governmental organizations, some experts, but the religious institutions is just in the we have like pray and Friday, they have a speech, they are encouraging saving water, encouraging to wash, something like this, but they don't deal with the main issues, with the water resources, with the water availability, with the regional issues, just at personal level.
Thomas. There was a question back there I want to take.
Yes. Can you please elaborate on how an individual or organization can deal with complexity, especially at the beginnings when everything seems to be very complex and intertwined? So how can we better deal with complexity? Because as you mentioned, so many things about what an individual can do, stakeholders, everything being intertwined.
I don't know. No, I think that especially in water, the big thing in water is identify what is the problem now. Problem, you need to work on two levels. You have to think about a long-term solution. But in water, working, especially in California, you all the time have to solve the problem at the present. Actually, I've done it in several places. I was actually invited to a panel that was supposed to deal with drought in Turkey, and at the end we had a flood. So the key element is how you are able to deal with situations, and do you have a flexibility to be able to assess what's going on and to be able to deal with the problem now, and at the same time, in the background, you think about some sort of long-term vision. You really need to have almost schizophrenic. You have these two personalities. Short-term, because that's the only way you become credible, and long-term, that you have some vision.
Thank you, David. Let's have one last question.
Like with the transboundary water issues raised by Lisa, what was not discussed in this forum was the issue on water ballast discharge by shipping companies. It's quite alarming because of the introduction of invasive species across oceans and countries. What do you think would be the solution to this aggravating problem, the issue on this ballast water discharge?
Did you guys get it, or I didn't get the question exactly?
Water ballast, like ships traveling internationally when they're bringing invasive species in.
I see.
Or discharging.
In the ballast, I see.
This is quite alarming, and I think we should also focus on this transboundary issue.
Yeah, it's a little bit not directly related to the water resources, but yeah, biological invasions are a huge thing, right? And so it's one of the major global environmental change issues, along with climate change, etc. So that's a loss of biodiversity, and there is I don't think we can find an easy or comment easily on the solution of that. There is a problem that is well known, and then it affects all marine life and
introduction of endemic introduced species compromise the endemic species of a one animal.
Yeah. That one, there's been other cases, like the opening of the Suez Canal in the 1800s. They brought a lot of tropical species in the Mediterranean, affected food webs, etc. And that was just the beginning, because then with the intensification of trade, and trade has been escalating in the last 50 years, of course there is much more of that we are seeing. I don't have any more effective comment on it. Yeah.
This is, like we speak about the problem, this is a global. Every country at most has 200 miles from its shore. So most of the oceans are at global common. We don't have a global government that basically comes to someone and says, gosh, you cannot dump your water in the ocean. So to me, I think the challenge of your generation is to develop slowly a global government to deal with global issues. Because this becomes worse and worse and worse all the time. Climate change, contamination of the ocean, what happened below the ocean. There are things that are really problematic, and unless people really get penalized and you have law, people do whatever they want to do.
Well, I mean, it is true, right, that our problems are becoming more global. Unfortunately, I fear that with the rise of nationalism, this becomes less likely. So I hope your generation can come up with a solution. Let me finalize with the following quote by Benjamin Franklin on water. He said, when the well is dry, we learn the worth of water. So I hope you all learned from this panel. I very much enjoyed it. Thank you very much. All right. Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.